Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Chax Training and Consulting. If you're interested in supporting the contrast, there are sponsorship opportunities available. So if you're interested, just reach out to us and we can discuss that in more detail. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as director of training solutions and principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am director of media productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you want your certification, head on over to accessibilityorganization.org/certifications and look at all the different certifications that IAAP has to offer. There's quite a few, and they can definitely help you in your career on your path to accessibility, right? So
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Chad, how you doing, man? Doing good?
Doing well. Still trying to keep cool in the Northeast. Yeah. 98 degrees and humid as all get out. But I'm sitting in my little cave in the bottom of my house where it's cooler and just working away and just trying to stay cool.
We don't have a lot of those in California. The below ground level house parts of your house, you don't get a lot of that.
Do you guys typically have basements?
No, never. I mean, you have to have a custom house to have a basement. They don't come in anything. We have post-tension cable slabs, which are basically earthquake proof. I don't know, is not the right word. Earthquake resistant slabs. They're concrete with cables that run inside them and then tensioned so that the concrete is always in compression so that if there's ever earth movement, it's more stable. At least that's what they tell us. So
yeah. I know down, like when we go down to the beach, I know none of the houses down there have basements either, but here in Pennsylvania, everybody has a basement for the most part,
Right.
And actually we live in what's called a bi-level. So it's not officially a basement, but a couple feet of built in, a couple feet of the bottom floor are underground. So it just helps it to stay cool. And,
it's a hobbit home.
It kind of is. I wish I did have a round door going out of my house. That would be so
Dude,
cool.
Don't tell me that, because I'll be heading out to you. We'll do that on a weekend, man. We'll get it done.
Dude, that would be, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
My wife may have issues, but we'll get her squared away.
There you go.
So Dax, today I wanted to talk about something a little different that came up when I was working on a project this week. And I guess we'll lump it into the topic of usability, right?
Right.
So I was working on a project and it was kind of course material, right? For like a class, and there were form fields in this PDF. So as people go through the form, there's like a question and it'll instruct them to say, describe an experience you had doing something, or it'll say list some items, blah, blah, blah. And in one of the form fields, the description above the form field said, make a list of, I'm going to make this up, right? Make a list of the activities that you enjoy doing. And then following that, it said that the next step basically was, okay, go back to the list you just created and circle the 5 most important items that you participate in.
Is there some new circle tool in Acrobat I'm not aware of?
Well, and that was the thing. And I think, Dax, like you and I are entrenched in accessibility, right? I mean, and everything we do, it's kind of first and foremost in what we do. But, as soon as I saw that, it was like a red flag to me. I'm like, wait a minute. And initially I was like, somebody using assistive software is not going to be able to do this. And then I thought about it for a minute and I'm like, wait a second, nobody who's filling out this form is going to be able to do this, So it wasn't, the accessibility component was the red flag for me. But as I thought about it more, I'm like, well, wait a minute, nobody's going to be able to do what they're instructing them to do. And, you had brought up the fact that, well, there is a commenting tool in Acrobat that allows you to circle things, but the average person is not going to be able to use it. And if they're using Acrobat Reader, they're not going to be able to use it either. So it's not really a feasible solution to the problem. So what I had done is I did contact the client and I'm like, hey, listen, I love that your focus is on making this document accessible, and we are going to make it accessible. However, the fact that you're instructing the user to circle items is making it inaccessible. Right. And so my suggestion to them, I said, listen, with a very minor change, you could remove this limitation. And I said, how about if you say instead, go back and put an asterisk behind the 5 most important items in the list you just made. Right. And that kind of changes the whole experience, right? So now I can do it digitally in the document, and B, even a user of assistive technology is going to be able to go back there and put an asterisk behind those items.
That's definitely a great solution, right? I mean, it kind of goes back to the kind of like required, items in red are required when you're dealing with a form, right? Well,
exactly.
Items in red with an asterisk makes it accessible for everyone. Using something other than, and in this case, a graphic, using something other than a graphic to be able to differentiate an item from another item is a solution for that. And I think, what we're doing here is we're talking about, evaluating a process for usability. And I think that's a really important step when, I think it's a step we don't often consider, because we just, as designers and creators, somebody gives us a napkin sketch and we're off to the races. And we're really not thinking about, okay, how is someone going to navigate this 500-page report? What does my heading structure look like? What do my bookmarks look like, right? How are they going to get through this? If I'm using endnotes or footnotes, which one's a better approach? Am I going to use a link that goes back and forth between the two? Evaluating all of those things really makes starting from the beginning and thinking about those even before you put, pen to paper or, mouse to click or whatever you want to say. It really can help cut down on the amount of rework that you have to do when you kind of get to the end and go, oh, this is probably not a great user experience.
Right. No, as we're talking, Dax, the one thing, and maybe you can shed some light on this, using assistive technology, right? I know I can go back and focus on that form field.
Right.
But if in that form field, I typed running, return, cycling, return, swimming, return.
Yep.
How do I navigate through that within the form field?
What do you mean? So if you've typed values into the form fields and you're hitting tab from, form field to form field, and you enter something in,
mode.
Right. Or even not.
Okay.
And tab is the shortcut key for next focusable item. So regardless of whether you're in forms mode or browse mode, the next focusable item will be the form field. And so you're going to fill in that form. You're going to put, fill in that form field and then hit enter and then hit tab again. Or it's going to tab you to the next one, depending upon what program you're using. But if you want to go back and listen to that, is that what you're trying to get at? I'm not following where you're going with this.
Well, so remember, like in this form, the instruction was, so the instruction was list 10 activities you like to participate in.
Right.
So as they're filling out that form field, they're going to type swimming, return.
Right.
Cycling, return. Kayaking, return. Right.
Yep.
and then they'll tab out of the form field.
So that's one form field.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which is my question to you. I mean, so they made the form field a multi-line field.
Okay, sure.
So how do they navigate the multiple lines that they entered within the form field?
It's accessing like text. When they're in the form field, they can use modifier keys to go next word, next word, next word.
Okay.
That kind of thing. So
that's not really a limitation.
No, it's a little cumbersome because if I've got a list of 3 different things, I'm not able to like go next line because there really isn't a next line. It definitely it would be better to have 3 separate form fields. But as a single multi-line form field, they're going to be able to navigate through that. Just not super. And again, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right? You go through and evaluate. Should it be a single form field or should it be multiple form fields? Guys, this is, for those of you who are listening to this is the process of evaluation. Now you can get caught up in the minutiae of everything and really go to town, but start with the basics, right? How am I expecting they're going to get through the data? And what do I think that basic user experience is going to be? And then start focusing in on, okay, well, I've got a form field with 3 different elements, but do I list it as one element or multiple elements? I mean, you can think about, I see this all the time with images where there's a bank of images that have 4, site map. Maybe there are 4 photographs from a site walk. You go to a commercial building and you've taken 4 photos of the different areas of the building and you drop it into your project sheet as one photo because you ganged them into Photoshop and added some footers, some image names underneath them, because that's just what you do. That's your process. If you drop that into Word, now what? What do? Do you add one piece of alt text for all 4 images, or should you, which is what you should do, which is break them all apart and have image, alt text for each one? Again, it goes back to evaluating that process of what am I doing and what's the impact will this have on someone's usability experience? Because compliance is one thing. Checking a box. It doesn't matter whether there were 4 separate photos ganged into one photo or 4 photos. If they have alt text, they're going to pass no matter what, right? But understanding that user experience, maybe being able to identify each of the different characteristics of those 4 images is important. And you don't want to write 2 paragraphs of text for alt text for these 4 images to accurately describe what's going on. So, it's about evaluation.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to, honestly, like just being aware, right? I mean, you and I have talked, before about how accessibility isn't just about technically making the document accessible, right? We always say, like, you've got to involve everybody who's in the process of creating your project, right? And that includes authors, editors, copy editors, designers, post-production, I mean, everybody needs to be aware of it. And we've talked about this before about writing with accessibility in mind, right? And that would involve like your authors, your editors, your copy editors, because, this is a classic example of where we're saying circle these 3 items, but the user is literally unable to perform that task. Right. And this is just one example. The other area of that form, it said in the space below, sketch out a diagram. So again,
drawing tools inside Acrobat, while they are in DC, are not available in then you're going to get people who are going to print it out, sketch it in, and then scan it back in. Right. And me, the overachiever, I'm going, fine, I got you. I'm going to go open Illustrator and create my thing in Illustrator and then open PDF and edit PDF. I mean, no one's going through that but me and you, right? I mean, come on. So it goes back to understanding, walking yourself through that experience that the end user is going to have. I think about things like navigation and bookmarks, right? How are they going to get around the document I'm designing? Are my headings sufficiently describing the chapters that are kind of present in my document? Am I going to use bookmarks? How am I dividing my subsections? Because there's nothing worse than a poor heading structure in a document, because it just makes for poor navigation when you create a bookmarks, right? And then, holy cow, don't get me started on menu navigations inside a PDF, right? We see, you and I have talked about this before on the podcast. Someone decides they want to make a mini web page out of their PDF document, right?
I mean, they're basically trying to make a PDF behave like a web page.
Right.
Right. And, I struggle with that a little bit because it creates a whole bunch of challenges for one, right? Because typically when you do navigation like that, if you're doing navigation like that, you're building your document in InDesign. You're not doing it in Word. I guess maybe you could try, but so if you did do that in InDesign, the problem is those items are going to be on a master page,
right?
And so all those links are going to be unmarked annotations because they have no content to attach themselves to, which creates a whole storm of problems.
Well, and for those of you listening out there, if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm dealing with this document right now as we speak, let me tell you, Chad and I have some secret sauce to fix this. We've got a way around this. And so if you designed yourself into the corner, we can help you with this, because we've gone through it 3 times now with 2 separate clients. So we've got some experience on how to fix this. But for the general person, there's not a way to do this. This is a ton of extra work. You have all these untagged annotations on across all these pages. And right now we've realized that links inside a PDF document that have shared destinations can cause big issues with, as soon as you change something in the document, now it doesn't link to the right place. I mean, it's a complicated thing, but the idea here is, guys, if you have repeating navigating headers that use shared bookmarks or shared hyperlinks, you can really cause some crazy problems when it comes to where those hyperlinks actually are when it comes to the tags tree. Mouse over, not a problem. You can click on any one of the links, it takes you right where to go. But if you look in the tags tree, all of a sudden, the link that's on page 21 is on page 12, and the link that's on page 13 is now really in the content order on page 26. It gets all screwed up, and we're trying to work with Adobe to figure out why. But at this point, we really haven't figured it out quite yet. No.
I mean, I would definitely put it in the category of a bug. Right. Yes. I mean, because what it's doing is bizarre. I mean, I have a theory on what's happening, right? Because when you create a shared destination, it basically names that destination based on content that you have selected.
Right.
And so when you create another link from the same content, my theory is that the destinations are overwriting each other.
Right.
Because you only have a limited number of characters to name those destinations. And when all the text is the same up to that limit of characters, I think they start overwriting each other. And I think that's what's happening. But
so I'll give you my theory. I think all of those links are stored in a table, XML table of sorts, where you've got in one column or like a tab delimited list, and you've got the hyperlink and the location, hyperlink location. And when you mess with any one of those, it screws up that delimited association. And now when you had a pair, it's now linked to the next one or the previous one, because you've removed part of it, but not all of it. And so instead of it being like a table where it's, line row by row, it's a delimited, whether it's comma or tab, it doesn't matter, whatever. However, it's delimited, now you're off by one. And so everything starts to get screwy. That's my take on what I think is happening. But who knows? The bottom line is you think it's going to export correctly. You got to change one tiny thing, and all of a sudden the entire document's unusable. And I spent an entire weekend, my 4th of July weekend, while everybody else was having fun, I was deleting all of the existing hyperlinks in a document that was 35 pages, and there were over 200, and then resetting every single one of them. It was not fun. I was not a happy camper that weekend.
I still feel bad about that because I kind of dumped that on you because I had something else I had to work on, and it was just a mess. So
nope, I hear you. I mean, and it is what it is, and we've all been there, right? It's all, somebody else designs a document, and then you've got, it gets put in your lap, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, whoa, this is not what I expected. And what normally would be just a few minutes worth of work has now become a ton of extra work. So,
well, and to be fair, right? Like, even if Adobe said, we don't have time to fix this, I can't fix this. If I could at least get them to allow me to set the default behavior of a hyperlink to not make it a shared destination.
Yes.
That would solve so many problems, right? I mean, to just be able to turn it off, that would be huge. But the default behavior when you make a link in InDesign is to make it a shared destination. But I know we digress. We kind of went off on a tangent on that one, but it's just worth bringing up because it creates a really huge problem. I mean, that was hours of our time that we lost because of that issue,
Oh, I mean, it was definitely more than $500 worth of billable time, to do that to do the extra work that we just lost. Yeah. Well, going back to, we talked about forms and understanding usability for forms. We've talked about images and alt text and understanding the usability of that and some navigations and bookmarks, right? One of the most common questions we get are about footnotes and endnotes. And what do I want? Usually the question is, what do I do? And then our answer is always, well, what do you want the user to be able to do? Because if I want the user to be able to move back and forth in between the footnote and the content kind of at their own will, then endnote is probably a better way to go because there's a hyperlink back to the actual content. Or, right, Chad? I mean, not the way that goes. Endnotes have that bidirectional link. Or if I want them to hear the footnote in context, in line with the text as it's being read, then I might use a footnote because then I can place that footnote right where it's supposed to go, right? And again, it goes back to, what do I want the user experience to be?
Right. And that decision is not strictly an accessibility decision. Right? I mean, whether you want footnotes that appear at the bottom of each individual page or endnotes, which are a cumulative collection of notes that appear at the end of the document, that's really a behavior that you have to decide on as just general document behavior, right? I mean, the accessibility part of that that comes after the fact, right? Because both notes and endnotes can be made accessible, so it's not really a big deal. But you're right to your point. Footnotes, we typically have them read immediately after the reference.
Yes.
Where endnotes, it's typically a link to the endnotes, and you could do it that way as well.
You could do a link to an expanded description. I was just thinking about this. If you made an endnote, if you had a caption at the bottom of a infographic, right? And the caption was, I don't know, whatever the caption is, but you made an endnote link underneath that to the expanded description. That would be a great way to then have kind of at the end of your document, like all the really long descriptions for your infographics that link back to the actual graphic, right? That'd be a great way to be able to kind of have that bidirectional link. I hadn't thought about that till just now.
And also, Access Word, the way it tags footnotes is it tags them as endnotes, which is a really interesting approach, right? So visually, the footnote still appears at the bottom of the page, but in the tag structure, the footnote appears at the end of the document. So it's kind of like an interesting approach to the problem, right?
Right.
And I guess we could arguably say it's a better approach because, as you and I know, and as our listeners, I guess we'll let them know, is a footnote reference is tagged as a reference tag. It could also be tagged as a label tag, but you never hear that. You never know that it's a reference. The screen reader never says reference.
Right. It just says link. Yep.
Right. It'll say, well, in the case of a footnote, it just says.
So guys, we just took a second to kind of review how a reference tag is presented when you go from Word to PDF versus an endnote. We were really focusing on the footnote. And does a footnote actually say link when you insert a footnote into a Word doc? And the answer is yes, it does. But more importantly, I think the process that we just used, that we just did, is the takeaway here. Because Chad and I had a difference of opinion on which way something was presented. So we went and tested it. And we did a couple tests and looked at it a couple of different ways. And then we got a solution. And I think that a lot of people, if more people adopted this kind of, okay, I'm not really sure what it's supposed to do, but let me do some tests and figure it out, you'll be able to come up with your own kind of results and figure out, hey, look, it does in fact say link, right? Now, I will tell you that if you manually put a footnote inside a table, right, and export that, it's not going to come out the way you think. And so manual footnotes never have the word link. And so you have to do some special things. And we talked about this in one of our other sessions where you can enclose that footnote in brackets, so that, because brackets are typically voiced by everything. So if they hear left bracket A, right bracket, they know that's a footnote and they can go look for a footnote section underneath the table, right? So understanding that user experience is so key. And when you don't understand the user experience, go test it out and figure it out. Or, of course you can call us, but, test it out and kind of see what's going on. Right, Chad?
Yep, absolutely.
So one of the last things I want to talk about, Chad, before we end our podcast here is understanding the user experience for captions and transcripts and that kind of thing, right? Thinking about, do I need open caption versus closed captions? And for those of you who might not know the difference between open and closed, open captions are burned into the video. They are part of the video pixels and they cannot be resized or recolored. They are what they are. And you'll use these when you know the platform that you're putting your video on doesn't support regular captions, right? Typically, when you're on a mobile platform and you've got those tiny little captions, if your video was designed for a desktop and you are in a 16:9, that letterbox kind of formation, and you put captions, you put open captions into your video, and then you're not really thinking about, okay, well, what happens if somebody's looking at this on their phone? Are those captions still going to be readable when it's portrait and only a third the size? And that's one of the benefits of closed captions, right, Chad? Is that closed captions allow for that resizing, which I think is so important, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're not restricted, when you have the closed captions. So I think I would just say more flexibility.
Yeah. Well, and if you're using some other device, let's say you're using a text to Braille device, your captions are going to be accessible by the Braille device. But if you're using open captions, they're burned into the video. They are not accessible to a person using a Braille device, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So having that flexibility. And then you have to think about, okay, if I'm doing open captions, am I providing a transcript? Right? And where is that transcript in relation to the video? Because if the transcript is at the bottom of the page in some subsection called transcripts, they may not even get to that point and know that it's there.
Yeah. I mean, for the transcripts, they should never be more than 3 key presses away from the video. so that they're easy for somebody using assistive technology to access.
Right, because that association is so important that I want to make sure that they understand that there's a transcript. When they get to the video and they can't process it in a typical way, they need to know that the transcript is there. Now, I might want to put the transcript before the video, right? If I'm really thinking about what I want the user experience to be. But again, this goes back to thinking about, what do I want the user experience to be? How do I want them to get to it? Is it important for them to get to the transcript before the video or after, right? All of this to say, guys, if you leave this podcast with anything, be thinking about how I want that user to interact with what I'm providing for them, right?
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we want to thank Chax Training and Consulting for sponsoring this episode of the podcast.
You're welcome, by the way.
And just remember, if you're looking for in-person or online training or struggling to establish an accessibility program within your organization, head over to accessibilityunraveled.com. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.